Live.
Go.
Good to go?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
We're rolling now?
Yeah, we're rolling.
Okay, and we're being live streamed, so welcome everybody and welcome to the Thurston County Board briefing. This is regarding the Transportation Improvement Program. It's July 29, 2019. I'm Commissioner John Hutchings, the chair of the board. Also present is Vice Chair Commissioner Ty Minster. Commissioner Gary Edwards is in the house, I believe. And we got County Manager Ramiro Chavez and a host of, we have Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell. And Ramiro, will you introduce everybody else?
Yeah, let me
Please.
see if I can. So what I have is Scott Lindblom, Matt Unselman, Teresa Parsons, Rick Thomas, Jennifer Walker, Steve Massey, and Karen Weiss.
Perfect. Great, thank you. And this is to go from 12:30 to 2. And it says decision is needed. That won't be today. And so are you going to frame this or we're going right to Jennifer or are you going to take it, Ramiro?
No, I think Scott Lindblom is going to take this on.
Oh, Scott. Great. Thank you, Scott.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Thank you for your time again this afternoon. I'm going to try to share my screen here to get the presentation up, and I'm optimistic it will work. And you should see the presentation right now. Do you see it now?
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. All right. So again, thank you for your time this afternoon. I'll be going over the county's Transportation Improvement Program. This document outlines the county's transportation program, including statutory requirements, project prioritization, program groups, construction needs and projects. It also looks at revenues, expenditures for both the operation maintenance and the capital program. It's part of the annual update to the county's comprehensive plan, the CIP, which we went over earlier this morning. The Transportation Improvement Program, I'll be calling the TIP from here on out, includes a look at the 1-year project list, a 6-year project list, as well as a 20-year list of projects anticipated for meeting growth needs. So with the TIP document itself, once it's completed, it's submitted to the Thurston Regional Planning Council, or TRPC, for review and inclusion into the Regional Transportation Improvement Program annual update. TRPC reviews these projects that receive federal funding to ensure the expenditures are consistent with regionally adopted goals and plans. And the county must file these adopted programs annually with the state DOT and the County Road Administration Board. The plan must include projects funded by the Transportation Improvement Board and the County Road Administration Board. This annual update also informs other jurisdictions and the public about the county's current planning direction for transportation needs. So what I'd like to do today is really walk through the TIP document itself. It's about 200 pages of which again outlines the county's transportation goals and programs. So prior to adoption of the budget by the county commissioners, the board is required by RCW and WAC to adopt a comprehensive transportation program for the ensuing 6 years. The county engineer in each county is required to also submit a recommended annual road construction program for laying out, construction, and maintenance of all the county roads. And that is really essentially the first year of the 6-year TIP. Adoption of the TIP and the annual road program authorizes the county engineer to approve right-of-way plans for specific projects that are in the TIP and the annual program itself. Through WAC 13620, the county engineer is also required to have all county bridges regularly inspected and provide you with an annual report of our bridge index. And it also requires staff to consult the bridge report when identifying projects that we'll be going over today that are included in the tip. So the tip includes several chapters, and the first one, again, I'll start out with is chapter 1. This highlights the legal requirements which really guide our program. Now, I'm not going to go through each one of these in great detail, but my intent today here is to really highlight that this entire program is guided by RCWs and WACs. And so what we've done in this chapter 1 is identify the RCW or WAC and to call out specifically how the county meets that requirement. For example, the tip requires creation of the county road fund, which is one of the RCWs. It requires the county to have a priority array when evaluating different projects. It requires a 6-year forecast of priorities and fiscal responsibilities, requires the annual program. Some of these things I just mentioned. But again, these start in chapter 1, which is on page 11. And I'm happy to go through any of these that you'd like at this time. And I do understand that you have both the paper copy of the tip as well as the electronic copy of the tip. So if you'd like me to go into any one of these in detail, I'm very happy to do that. Otherwise, I will go on to chapter 2.
I think you continue.
Okay. So in the chapter 2 of the tip, it's really talking about the funding sources that we have. The lion's share of our funding comes from the road levy, the property tax, but also the county's portion of the state gas tax. We also rely heavily on the transportation impact fees to help set up our project list and fund some of our critical projects. And as I mentioned during the CIP presentation, the real estate excise tax has also been a really key component to help fund some of our critical fish passage barrier removals. And just in from the County Road Administration Board yesterday morning is tying into our gas tax receipts. So as I mentioned, road levy, the property tax is a key part, but as is the fuel tax or the gas tax. With the COVID pandemic we have going on right now, that's affected our gas tax receipts. Really what that means is to date, for this calendar year, we are about $800,000 behind in our gas tax revenue based on the projections that were done earlier in the year. In a practical sense, $800,000 means about 16 miles of chip seal or about 2.5 miles of pavement overlay. That's the equivalent funding of the $800,000. And also in the chapter, it talks about the federal funding programs, where we get most of our grants from for our capital programs, federal and state funding. So it outlines the STP program, Safe Routes to School program, our bridge program, and several others. And again, these are critical for really advancing our capital projects in general. Different grant funds have different match requirements, and different grant funds have different intents. For example, the bridge program through the federal government, as the name suggests, that is really focused on bridges. Safe Routes to School, again, the same thing. The state's or the County Road Administration Board's Rural Arterial Program, that is, as you can imagine from the name, really looks at funding rural road upgrades that are arterials. So each funding source has a window through which we can apply for funding and do the project itself. So a rural arterial program project could not do a local road. A bridge project could not do an intersection unless, of course, it had a bridge to it. So each of these come with strings attached, and we rely again heavily on the county road fund and traffic impact fees as seed money or match money to really advance our capital program. And with that, I will go on to chapter 3.
Hey, Scott?
Yeah.
What's our inventory? How many total bridges do we have? It's like 119 or something like that? And how many are which kind of state of repair?
Yeah, great question. So I'll be going through the bridge program in quite a bit more detail at the end, but right now we have 138 bridges in our inventory. And you may recall back a few years ago, we had less than that. And it's not that we built another 10 bridges in the last year. What we're doing now is going through some of our parks and trails and adding also our short span bridges into our inventory. So we're required to have those reportable bridges to the federal government in that list. but now to have a more comprehensive and really well thought out program, we're adding even those short span bridges. And the big difference there is the length. And the reason that's important is a short span bridge typically does not qualify for federal money from the bridge replacement program. So those projects with short span bridges typically are funded from the county road fund.
You'll get deeper into the bridges later then, so I'll just wait.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner
real
Mesa
quick.
had a question.
Yeah.
When you said that we're $800,000 behind on gas tax revenue, that's based on, I mean, is that based on real numbers, like up to this point in the year, or is that some kind of projection for where we'll be at December? And then my follow-up question is, whatever the answer to that is, what does that mean for our project? Does that just mean that we have a list of priorities and we won't, maybe the last thing won't get done because we're $800,000 short, or what's the practical impact of that?
Great question. Those revenue projections are done by the County Road Administration Board each year, and they look at the estimated gas receipts that we will get throughout the course of the year. With the decrease in miles traveled throughout this year with reduced travel due to the COVID pandemic, that number reflects gas tax collections through the month, gas tax revenue through the month of May that is collected in July. So it usually lags about 2 months. Right now, if you look at the current projections throughout the whole 12 months, I believe we're looking at about 85% of what was projected. That's the current projection is 85% of what was budgeted, I guess. But for the month of May, I believe it was on the order of 62% of what was collected. And in the month of April, it was 65 or 67% was collected from what was budgeted. If that makes sense.
That does make sense. And then the follow-up is, wherever that lands, let's say it's 15% down, what does that mean for the citizens of Thurston County? It means that we just have to delay some chip seal for, a period of time, or is it a construction project that's affected, or
yeah. We really look at the programs and projects we have and figure out where we could or should cut that. So it's not necessarily a chip seal or an overlay. It might be reducing the ending fund balance. It might be cutting back on this or that. So we really have to look at that on a case-by-case basis. I brought up the chip seal and overlay really just to give you kind of an example in a real practical sense as to what that could mean. So I did not mean to suggest that we will be cutting back this or we'll be cutting back that. It's just that the revenue is not coming in as planned, and what that equates to, if we were to put all that into overlay, for example, it would be about a 2.5 mile difference. And again, not saying that we are putting it into overlay or that would be cut back.
Understood. Would the board then have to come? Would you be coming, just so I understand what might be ahead? Would you be then coming back to the board to discuss what needs to not get funded because of the shortfall in revenue, or how's that going to play out or unfold?
Not necessarily, because we could be just cutting back on, as I mentioned, perhaps the ending fund balance. We'd have to look at it and see where those cuts would be, because it could be small cuts throughout several different programs. So we just have to kind of see where that plays out. We also don't know what the next couple months will bring. So it could improve. I know the projections still are that they'll be lower than originally projected, but certainly higher than the 62%. So where it's going to go, I think it's a crystal ball approach right now, but based on the projections from CRAB at the end of the year, I believe we're looking at about an 85% collection from what was budgeted.
And that equals $800,000. Is that where you're getting that 800,000?
No, the $800,000 is through collections in July.
So what would 85% collection for the year look like in terms of a reduction?
I could get you that. It's on a spreadsheet I've got that is behind my presentation right here. So
okay, no problem. Thank you, Scott.
I have something to add, Scott, and that is Commissioner Edwards talks about the sales tax bubble we might be in the county benefiting from with people buying online through this pandemic. And I was in a meeting this morning in the Visitor Convention Bureau and Tourism Promotion area. And they have said and indicated, and they're showing that folks are so, they're taking local trips and doing staycations and touring around the state. They're calling it revenge trips or revenge vacations. They're just getting out and going somewhere, but they're not taking the trains, they're not taking flights, airlines, or buses. And so I'm thinking as the weather gets better and people are driving more, staying local, that perhaps we'll see that that gas tax kind of recover. It's kind of the anticipated result, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll have to see where that shakes out. I think it's certainly these are, and I hate to abuse the word, but these are uncharted waters we're in right now, and it's really anybody's guess, as you probably heard this morning, as to where this is going to go and what's going to happen. But certainly it is having an effect, not just on the road fund, but on businesses, on citizens, and certainly the general fund as well. So,
Thank you.
So looking at chapter 3, what you'll see in chapter 3 is a couple things. First is you'll see the traffic impact fee annual report. And you may recall that Public Works presented this to you on June 10th as part of the traffic impact fee study. And the chapter in general looks at, the 6-year look at revenues and expenditures for the road fund. And the county code requires us to provide this information to you. As we discussed during the CIP presentation, these numbers really should be considered draft at this point. And you'll also get the opportunity to review the final numbers during your review of the Public Works budget. But the traffic impact fee that you see up on your screen here, which is in the tip on page 21, that is the annual report for impact fees, again, that was presented to you in June. And the impact fees, as you recall, are the one-time fee charged to developers to help finance their share of the cost of roads, parks, and schools. Certainly here it's focused to roads. And the impact fees can't be used for operation and maintenance or repair or replacement of existing capital facilities unless that capital facility adds some element of increasing capacity to it. Any projects in the TIF program, again, have to have some element of capacity, improving capacity to it. So it could be adding a turn lane, it could be adding another lane to a road, but adding guardrail would not suffice. That doesn't increase the capacity. Studies have shown that widening a road, widening a lane and adding shoulders does increase capacity. But I'm happy to go through that now. I have gone through this, as I mentioned, in June and at the July 15th briefing. But I do want to add that these traffic impact fees are a critical piece of us being able to prepare for the expected 80,000 people that will be moving to this community in the next 20 years. We use these traffic impact fees to leverage local and state and federal money to help prepare for that incoming group of people. So while we do have a lot of capacity issues in the community now where we know we have a lot of traffic, we also base that kind of our projections on a regional transportation model put together by Thurston Regional Planning that forecasts, not only looks at the current issues today, but forecasts where we'll be in 20 years. So these impact fees really help us prepare for that expected growth. And without it, we may be behind the 8 ball in the future and not be ready for those folks that we do suspect are coming. The revenues and expenditures looks at, for the whole road fund, also looks at the last couple of years of the 6-year plan, and that really is considered a forecast. Later on in chapter 3, which is the same chapter, it also talks about the construction fund in general. So what you'll see in your packet in front of you is that a lot of the numbers are blank. And again, that's because we don't have those numbers refined yet. But before this is adopted, before you do adopt it, you will have the opportunity to review those. But just to give you some sense of what the numbers are, typically in an average year, we generate about $20 million into the road fund from the road levy of the property tax, and about $5 million from the motor vehicle fuel tax. 25% of our money typically goes toward maintenance, about 16% toward preservation. Our administration is generally only about 7% of our budget. We also transfer money from our road fund to our capital fund, which is outlined on that slide as the construction fund. And again, we leverage all that for grants, which over time have gotten increasingly competitive. And with any comments on that?
Yeah, do you have time for a question on that, Scott?
Of course, of course.
What do you mean by preservation?
That's the chip seal, crack seal, and pavement overlays.
Okay. And then under traffic impact fees, you got a reimbursement of previously built projects for previously built. What's that?
Yeah, great question. So the county code allows us, and state law allows us to reimburse projects that were already completed that added capacity to the road system. So the traffic impact fee was established and fees first started collecting in 2013. But we do know that we completed projects prior to that added capacity. So we are allowed to put a portion of our impact fees to reimburse the road fund for that part of a project that added capacity. And if I could, I just make a very hypothetical general example here. So if our impact fees went into place in 2013, we could reimburse a project that we completed in 2010 that, say, added a lane to a road or added a turn lane, which increased capacity, even though that project was completed prior to the impact fees.
How far back can you go?
Offhand, I don't know, to be honest with you.
Well, I've been around here a long time, so I know a lot of those projects. If you gave me an answer, I'd write some of them down.
We're only allowed to go back 10 years, Scott.
10 years, okay.
Okay.
And before you widen the road and do some type of thing like that to improve capacity, there has to be a traffic survey done, and all that process has to be adhered to?
Yeah, we have a very rigorous process we go through on all of our projects. And it certainly starts with looking at, what is the issue we're trying to address. Sometimes it is a safety issue, and sometimes a safety issue will end up adding capacity to a roadway. A great example is the Yelm Meridian project we have going to construction next year. That's a project.
I lost your sound.
I'm sorry?
I lost your sound for a moment.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So a great example is the Yelm Meridian project we have going to construction next year. That intersection is going to be doing a couple things. It will be improving the safety of that intersection, as well as adding capacity. So we look at, in that and many other cases, we look at the problem is it's a safety issue we're trying to address and a congestion issue we're trying to address. So what's the best way to do that? What's the most cost-effective way? What's the least impactful way? What's the most efficient way? So, we look at signals, we look at, four-way stops, we look at roundabouts, and we not only look at the cheapest to build, but we also look at, what's the best for the community, cheapest and most effective, 10, 20 years down the road. So, we don't put our blinders on and look at, well, this is the cheapest thing to build, but it might be just a nightmare to maintain. So we do take a holistic look, and it looks at, again, environmental impacts. It looks at, private property impacts and what's going to be best for those 80,000 people that we expect to be coming here as well.
All right, thank you.
So I'm going to move on to chapter 4. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, in the earlier part of the presentation, we are required to have what we call a priority array and how we look at and prioritize our projects. So our transportation improvement program includes several different programs, and you can see a couple listed there on page 33. We have the ADA program and our bridges program and our capacity program. And each program typically has projects identified in it that are important to that program. For example, we have bridges right now. We have our one structurally deficient bridge. We've got other bridges that are functionally obsolete, which means their condition is fine. They don't meet the current standards, though, perhaps. And then other bridges are getting to the point of their age where I guess they're getting time to be replaced. They're tired. They're built in the 1920s, for example. So capacity projects, we look at those that have perhaps the most congestion or the biggest impact to the most number of people. So we look at all these different programs and projects, a safety project, and we within each of those programs, we determine which is the the highest priority. So we look at what's the biggest safety issue. If there's a safety issue that affects 500 people versus 50,000 people, we might look at we might weigh that in a different way. We look at citizen input. Citizens also provide some great feedback for us on our road system. We do a great job of maintaining and preserving our 1,000 miles of roads, but it's often the citizens that can bring things to our attention that they drive the road every day. They might notice, the bank shuffling, sloughing away or something. So we look at all that information, all that feedback, and then we prioritize projects within each of these programs. So once we do that, we have 8 different programs, and then we have to figure out which number one project in ADA or bridges is more or less important than the number one project in our capacity program or our pavement preservation program. So we have a way we can compare all of our number one projects in each program. So all that's wrapped up into what you see in our 6-year program, where we've considered all those things. We've looked at, the funding availability. We've looked at, the cost benefit analysis of different options. We weigh those, and then what you'll see in our 6-year program is a prioritized list considering all those things. And that is kind of the output of what we do in chapter 4. Any questions on that? I didn't get into a lot of detail, but I'm very happy to do that if you'd like. But I guess my takeaway is we're required to prioritize projects, and we do it. And we do, my opinion, fantastic job.
I don't have any questions. I'm looking at my seatmates if they have any questions.
No, sir.
Okay.
No, okay.
I'll move on to chapter 5. Now, chapters 5 and 6, this is chapter 5 is the annual road program, which the commissioners are required to adopt each year. This is really, as I mentioned earlier, the first year of our 6-year program. These are the projects and we'll be scheduled to work on in 2021. It goes into a bit more detail than our 6-year projects, because this one identifies the different funding source, the different expenditures, where we're going to be spending that money on and what phase of the project. And it is required by WAC 136-16. And a lot of these projects we did go over this morning during the CIP presentation. So chapter 5 and 6, I wasn't anticipating going into great detail on any one of these projects, but again, if you have specific questions, I'd be more than happy to do that.
I don't need to. Gary or Ty?
No.
Okay.
No? Okay.
And again, this is the second half of that. So this is the full 6-year look. And again, a lot of these projects that we'll be doing in this year, or excuse me, 21 and 22, we did discuss earlier. So I will move on to chapter 7. Chapter 6, excuse me. So in chapter 6, we've highlighted some of the, I'm going to just highlight some of the changes we've had from the prior tip. We did add 12 new projects from the prior tip. Typically, these are when we have new grant funds that we've received or applied for. One of the conditions, as I mentioned much earlier in the presentation, is that to apply for a lot of these funding opportunities, we have to have the project listed in the tip. And so what you'll see in some of the tip projects that are planned for the last couple of years of the tip, there may be just a token amount of money to that. And we do that because we have to have the project in the tip, and the tip has to be fiscally constrained. So there's really a placeholder amount of money out at the end years. If we don't get the funding or don't get the grants, then typically the project would be removed from the tip. And I do want to highlight on this page here, priority number 38, we did just recently receive funding for this project. This will, well, I'm sorry, I'm looking at a different one, or thinking of a different one. So this is a project we applied for money from the County Road Administration Board a couple years out. We're not sure if we'll get it yet or not. But if we do, it wouldn't be for several years at the latter end of this project. Sometimes projects are removed from the tip, and typically those are when the projects are completed, or perhaps they're moved to our 20-year list, or sometimes the project may no longer be needed. And speaking of our 20-year list, and we did cover this a bit in our traffic impact fee briefings in June and July, but this is a list of projects that we anticipate needing to address the growth that is projected. These projects are investments on the planning horizon, really needed to address that growth. And most of the projects are identified through the regional transportation model by Thurston Regional Planning. And as I mentioned a minute ago too, the projects on the list are not just those that solely address capacity, but they have to add capacity to the project. So the example I gave earlier was a safety-driven project that might add some capacity. So a intersection that has some safety concerns, we may add a roundabout, which then adds capacity. That makes the project eligible. Or a rural road upgrade project that really is intended to improve the driving surface or replace the pavement. If it widens the lanes and adds shoulders, again, that adds that capacity, which then makes it eligible for the impact fees.
That's where I see the Steamboat Island Road Northwest project.
I'm sorry?
The Steamboat Island Road project
Uh-huh.
is on that one that we talked about a while back, I think.
It is, and we do have money out several years out to start looking at options out there. We don't have a full cost for that because at this point, it's quite a ways out in the future, and we're not sure what will be needed out there when we get to that point.
Okay.
So now I'd like to go on to chapter 8, which is the bridges. And this is one of those parts of the tip that we are required to submit to you each year. And in fact, it's required of all county engineers in the state to submit it to their elected officials, their county commissioners. What this does is identify the projects in our bridge inventory. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we have 138 in our inventory now. 10 were added in the past year. One of them was from the Fish Passage program, where we added a prefabricated bridge. We're adding a couple more prefabricated bridges in the next year or two, also as part of our Fish Passage program. In 2019, we did complete 74 inspections of our bridges. And I think it's also important to note that 16 of our bridges in our inventory were or already have exceeded their theoretical design life of 75 years. And 10 of those bridges were built in the 1920s or earlier. I think in 2014, when we replaced the Little Rock Road Bridge, we called the L4 Bridge, when it had to be closed due to the very poor condition, in that bridge, when we were decommissioning the bridge or taking it apart, we realized that there was no steel reinforcing in the concrete, which made it really easy for the contractor to remove the bridge in preparation for the new bridge. But that steel reinforcing is an essential component to make a bridge last a long time. This is a bridge that we had no design records for. It was built by the DOT back in the day. When the day is, I don't really know, because again, we have no records. But what we do know is we have a few other bridges of similar design, and we suspect there may not be steel reinforcing in those either. Because of that concern or that suspicion, we do more rigorous inspections on those on a more frequent basis. We also, once we are done doing our bridge inspections and the bridge report, we do send that to the DOT to make sure that we are in compliance with the National Bridge Inventory System. One of the things that we have coming up is there is a new requirement to evaluate all of our bridges to meet the latest federal requirements for special hauling vehicles, to make sure our bridges can handle these new special hauling vehicles. We suspect that very soon, perhaps by the end of the year, we will have completed all of our ratings of all of our bridges. One of the things we suspect will happen is that several bridges will need to be posted for load ratings as a result of this new requirement. When we complete the evaluation, we will be briefing the commissioners and giving you a full update on our findings for that evaluation. As we look at our bridges, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but we look at a couple different things when we evaluate our bridges and inspect them. We look at scour evaluations. We know several bridges that are susceptible to scour, which is basically the stream or the river washing out the supporting soil underneath. We look at whether a bridge is functionally obsolete. Those are bridges that were built to earlier design standards. The bridge might be in fine structural condition, but it may not meet, it may not be as wide as the adjoining road. And we have 20 of those such bridges. Well, I mentioned we have 15 bridges that are scour critical. And structurally deficient is another term you might not hear about. Us on the engineering side, we hear about bridges that are structurally deficient. What that means is that part of the bridge perhaps requires a replacement of a certain critical component, whether it's a foundation or superstructure or deck. It does not necessarily mean that the bridge is in imminent failure and will fall over, but there's a part of it that should be replaced or repaired. And I'm very happy to note that our Reeder Road Bridge that was built from a old flatbed rail car back probably in the 1920s, we did get federal funding for that, and the plan is to open bids for that tomorrow and get that bridge replaced this calendar year. Again, leveraging county funds for, I believe that's a 80% grant for that project. It'll be about roughly $2 million project. So we're very happy to get that. And then once we get that bridge replaced, we will have 0 structurally deficient bridges in our inventory. We did complete several repairs on bridges last year. Perhaps one of the more notable ones was the new railing on the Deschutes River Trestle on the Yelm-Tonano Trail. We are right now in the middle of replacing the piles on that bridge. So in next year's bridge report, you'll get a report on the pile replacement and any other bridge work we did this year. We do have several bridges that are high priorities for us to get replaced. One is the Yelm Highway Bridge over the BNSF tracks by the Amtrak station. The estimated cost for that bridge is about $16 million. At this time, we don't have any money secured for that. And bridge funding from the federal government is extremely competitive. So while it's a very high priority bridge for us, we would love to replace it. Until we get such funding, it's unlikely we'll be doing any work on that soon. The Little Rock Road Bridge, we call the L5 Bridge down by 113th Avenue. That's one of those bridges that we suspect has no steel reinforcing. It's used by over 7,000 cars a day. And it should be noted that when the other Little Rock Road Bridge failed in 2014, we did inspections of this and did find cracks in that as well. we did repair those cracks. So it's a very safe bridge to drive now, but it certainly needs to be replaced. We did recently receive STP funding to make improvements in that area of the 113th, and part of that project will replace that bridge. So we're very excited about that. That is planned for construction in 2023. So finally, looking ahead, we do expect, as I mentioned, to complete our load ratings for those special hauling vehicles. Upon our completion of that, we'll update the board on really what that means as far as bridge postings and the overall condition of all of our bridges. We are going to continue to look at adding bridges to our bridge inventory. Again, those are going to be some of the short span bridges and some of our trail bridges as well. We also want to get a long-term plan in place to get another certified bridge inspector. And we'll also look to continue to improve our cost tracking of all of our bridge program activities. And with that, that's a lot to take in. I know, and especially after a full day of CIP briefings and projects. So I would open it up to any questions that you may have or anything I may have gone over too quickly.
Commissioner Menser, have you anything?
Can't think of anything offhand, no.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Scott, this is in reference, I'm going to use an example. I'm sure there's many, but over at Vale Road and Reichel Road, the county put a bridge in, I don't know, 15 years ago maybe. Anyway, they took down an old steel constructed bridge support mechanism. And when they put the bridge in, they then built the ramp. They elevated the bridge, and then they built the ramp up to the bridge. But what happened when they built the ramp up to the bridge with no culverts in the ramp, it then started backing the water up, so the water flooded a lot worse than it used to. So now do you take into consideration that, say, a fish issue or flooding issue, and try to mitigate that by maybe putting culverts in your ramps going up to the bridge so that the Mother Nature can have the flow that it used to have?
Yeah, we certainly do that. And I'm not sure on the specifics on the one you're referring to, but yeah, that's part of what we do. And I think, yeah, I guess I don't know the specifics, but we certainly take that into account in all of our designs now, for sure.
Okay.
That's a critical part of that. Matt, did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
I was going to say that the standards have changed a lot in the last 15 years. 15 years ago, I think I know what bridge you're talking about, and that was actually built by county crews, if I remember right. And now, since then, the FEMA and also the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife standards have gotten much stricter, that the bridge spans have had to get much longer to accommodate those flows. So often now, our approaches won't even be in the flood channel or the floodway.
Okay, I just wondered.
I know exactly what bridge you're talking about. You're absolutely right, though.
Okay, thanks.
My question is, when I look at page 174 and you list on the bridge conditions that you have Chehalis Indian tribe, does that mean they only have one bridge? And that means Nisqually doesn't have any bridges? And then my second question is, who maintains the functionality or structural upkeep of a bridge on tribal property? Is it between the tribe and the feds, or is it the state, or what do we do? What do they do?
Yeah, the bridge that's listed or noted on page 174, that is a tribal bridge that goes over a county road. Because it goes over the county road, we do an inspection of that, but the bridge itself is the tribes. And the reason we do the inspection is really just to make sure that the vehicles traveling on the county road are safe.
So if that bridge becomes deficient in one way or another, obsolete, whatever, what do you know what the process? I'm just wondering if we have a share in that, or is that just between the tribe and the federal government?
It's my understanding that would be the county would not have involvement with that. I'm sure we would coordinate activities, but the cost to replace it, design it and replace it, my understanding would be the tribe. Probably.
Okay.
I'll add, if I could, I'll add a little bit to that. So we're just required to do a what's called a federal safety inspection because there's vehicles on the county facility traveling beneath the bridge. And we have to do the same thing for like the railroad trestle. So like a good example would be the railroad trestle on Mullen Road that gets hit all the time by oversized vehicles. We have to respond and do a safety inspection on that bridge, even though it's not our bridge, because the vehicles are on the public roadway. Now, if that bridge ever had to be, it had to have any maintenance or repair or replaced, all that cost would be on the railroad or the tribe or whoever owns the bridge.
All right, thank you, Matt. Any other questions?
No, sir. No, sir.
No. So it looks like the directing which you need is to submit an item to request a public hearing on the tip. When would that be coming?
We will get that turned in not this month, but early August at our earliest convenience.
Okay. Thank you. Ramiro, anything? Or
I don't have
Jennifer?
anything, Commissioner.
Jennifer, do you have anything to add?
No, thank you.
All that for a no, thank you. All right, well then, this concludes this meeting of the TIP, or the Transportation Improvement Program. Thank you all very much for joining in.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good
Bye-bye.
job.